Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Shelburne Planning Commission on January 23rd. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Take a motion to approve.
Seconded?
Moved by Kate, seconded by Stephen. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next is approval of the minutes from January 9th. Take a motion to approve those. Moved by Megan, seconded by Jean. Any discussion?
No, I didn't see anything. I thought they looked good.
Yeah, I did.
Was it controversial?
No, it was minor typos that aren't even worth mentioning. Just double checking my comments. Okay, so there were no other comments? All right, all in favor of the minutes as written?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now any disclosures this evening relating to anything?
No.
Okay. Then we have open to the public for anything not on tonight's agenda. Any comments? And I'm not sure who's here for what, but I don't know that we would necessarily get to the discussion that we were having last time around the Champlain Lanes property. So if anybody had anything to say around that, it might be worth making a comment now, because I don't know if that's something that we'll actually get to later.
Oh, okay, that was what I was interested in.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome to stay. We might. It's just more, depends on how long the PUD buffer takes.
Yeah, I guess just reiterating that.
Okay, yeah, would you mind the microphone?
Just wanting to reiterate what was discussed last time about wanting to preserve the rules and regulations that exist now and not modifying it, that we're not interested. We're part of the whole neighborhood nearby up on the hill and already dealing with the effects of Harbor Place and other things that we support. And just not wanting to have dense housing, apartment buildings. We don't have apartment buildings in Shelburne, really. We don't like the idea at all. So would wish for there not to be a modification of the current rules and regulations in order to accommodate that. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's it.
Yeah, and I do feel, do you have a comment around the same thing? I just want to give enough time.
You have to.
Yeah, okay.
I just feel that if you do concede to making this building that Champlain Housing and Ray Pecor and Jeff Davis would like to see built there and expand the number of units in one building, I just see it opening up a floodgate for other buildings to happen. And I just want to say that there are probably 500 homes up in that neighborhood from all ranges, price ranges, but everybody is very proud of their neighborhood, and that's not to say that people going to this building aren't going to be proud of their neighborhood as well. But we have suffered the effects of Harbor Place. And if you go back to the news and look at, there have been some major issues with Harbor Place, and I'm not pointing fingers, but it hasn't been well managed. And Champlain Housing is part of that. And so I think it's just scary. It's a little scary for the neighborhood. We're worried that if you say okay to this particular situation, to appease the builder, the architect, the housing manager, we just feel that it's really going to change the neighborhood. And while I'd like to see some high density within the ranges of what you thought was good. That's what form-based zoning is all about, but you had some limits. And it is, we like those limits. And so It's a corner that already has some flow issues. If you're trying to turn left, it's a nightmare because of the store's entry right there next to Shelburne Road. That is something that should be looked at. Now, a number of people turning right, along with I don't know if it's an easement, I don't know what it is that they're worried about, but from the park, the trailer park, using that space, the front of the lot, to turn left. And I don't blame them. If I lived where they were and I could use a light and turn left, I'd do the same thing. I don't know why why they're concerned, the builder, the investor, architect are concerned about that, but apparently that has to stay. I don't know how they're going to do it all. That's the other thing. I don't know if each and every one of you have gone to that lot and have looked at the lot. I don't see how they're going to get green space, which we'd like to see, landscaping, 2 buildings, and a play area and parking. I don't know how they're going to do it in that space. But take a look at it, and maybe that's how you should make your decision. And we just are asking you to be careful before you start changing the formats that you have already decided were good for the neighborhood. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your inputs. And I would also encourage you, if you see on a future agenda, because I imagine that they may end up coming back in. We've already had 2 presentations from them, just basically proposing, saying this is what we're looking to do. And that may happen again. As we discussed last time, our deliberations aren't specific necessarily to that project, and as at least the position that I was taking, and I can speak for myself, it was more about the uniqueness of that lot. But whatever goes in there, the uses that are allowed are allowed. The questions that they had were more about their designs and what that might facilitate, or given the nature of that lot, what changes might be made to facilitate easier development in that area. And that's where a lot of those discussions have been. So I would encourage you to come to any future meetings if you want to get more insight. And I'm saying this because there were questions last time. Can you bring up those plans? Can we talk about the lot and what they were proposing? And we're looking at it from a regulatory perspective, but I think it would be very informative for anybody interested to see those presentations so that you can, like us, wrap your head around what's being asked. And then maybe some of these regulation discussions.
I have seen their
Okay.
plans.
I think you have to go to the light.
Well, true.
For the 10.
Yeah, but and again, this is a longer process. This is a long process, and meeting notices and agendas get published. So I do encourage you to continue to be a part of this conversation, because that's what helps all of this move forward.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question. I was on the website, I was trying to find some information, but I couldn't, so I was hoping maybe you could point me in the right direction. So I'm assuming apartment buildings get taxed differently than like residential family, right? Like housing?
I'm not equipped to answer that.
Okay.
Anybody
Because I'm
else?
just thinking about, if you put 30 apartments in there, and just say devil's advocate, worst case scenario, if you had 2 kids per apartment, that'd be 60 more kids. Is then the town required to buy another bus now? And then it's like, where's the capacity at the school? Like, are these things factored in? Are they not allowed to be factored in? And then if that infrastructure has to be purchased, is the town on the hook for that? Like, how? I'm just trying to figure all that stuff out. I'm just wondering if anybody figures that into the planning as well.
A good question. And per town plan, when these development projects come in, there are discussions around does the current infrastructure have the capacity to support what those developments are bringing in? And in some cases, I believe it would be a decision for the DRB to potentially break up a project over multiple years in order to accommodate any particular infrastructure growth that needs to go along with that. So short answer, yes, those things are considered. I couldn't tell you I know that that is the case for things like sewer and just traffic volumes and that sort of thing. As far as school goes, I couldn't answer that specifically, but I imagine that that there's discussions around, well, if you're going to have a unit that is going to be skewed towards lots of kids, what is that going to do to the schools, and how does that affect the school infrastructure? But I can't speak to that directly.
Yeah, that's always having a hard time trying to find that information.
Now we're part of a union, so that would, the costs of that would be distributed among the other entities in the union too.
Even for just the Shelburne school?
Oh, yeah, I would think so, yeah. I mean, like,
What do you mean union? I'm sorry.
well, we're
Well, the supervisory union.
supervisory,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So like, I know that, our recent addition to, and changes to our, renovations to our school, the costs of that are being shared throughout the union, just as, I think Charlotte is maybe doing some things, and we're helping to pay for that. So it's, I remember the point of it being that it would be more cost-effective to join with other communities. So hopefully that puts your mind to rest a little bit on the school front, but some of the other questions, you could probably get some of that information from the listers in terms of how an apartment is valued for tax purposes versus a single-family house.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Another concern I had is, where do they go? I know that you were talking about commercial being, now I don't know if this has been voted on, but commercial being part of an apartment building for this form-based zoning. And you were talking about making it a community. My concern there is, what community will they have? Where is the playground? Where is, if it is filled with kids, which is probably, it could, at least 50% of it will be, where's their playground? Where do they walk to get, to purchase things, to, I don't know, to do anything? For activity, there's not going to be activity on that lot because there's no room for it. So that's what I'm saying. Where do they go for their fun?
I'm not even sure how to answer that.
Well, I had two boys that were totally in the neighborhood constantly, riding bikes, skateboarding, playing hockey on the street. And I just wonder where these, because it is such a small lot and there is nothing right there for them, where do they play? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the input. All right. Well, if there aren't any other comments, unrelated to any agenda items, our next topic is the Telecommunications Ordinance. And as far as that goes, we're going to have some consultation with the town attorney. And the option is, because we're going to do a deliberative session because the Telecommunications Board is a quasi-judicial unit. So we would either need for all of us to move into the Peach Room or have anybody who's not part of this to leave the room, at least for this part of the discussion. Is that accurate? I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. Okay, excellent. But you'd be welcome to come back in, but we would, this next part around the Telecommunications Board, we just have a consultation with the attorneys. So we need to have a little deliberative session.
I thought it was interesting.
Oh, yeah. Right. It will be public and it will get interesting.
Maybe before the cameras go off, we could introduce both Brian Monahan and Kristen Seamus, who are with Monahan, Safar, and Yudusham, the town's attorney. And then the question I was going to pose is, I understand that with the DRB, they can deliberate at any time. There is not a motion required. Is this the same general situation with this board? Or would you suggest that a member make a motion to enter into a deliberative session?
I don't think there's any harm in making a motion to go into a deliberative session, because that's, to sort of take action, you need to do that. But it's not like an executive session motion, which you would see the select board do. You have a pending application before you, so you're entitled under the open meeting statute to get legal advice in a deliberative session. So you just have to make the motion and you go in. There's no other special steps that go along with that.
All right.
I'll move that we go into a deliberative session.
I second.
All right, moved by Steven, seconded by Jean. And, yep, and the camera goes and we'll be back. Agenda. All right, so we're rolling. Okay, so for whoever was watching, we just had our deliberative session with the town attorneys. And given the hour, we do have zoning topics. I was really hoping to get into the PUD buffer amendments. I do think that, I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on this. Just going through it, I could see that there could be some good discussion around it. And I feel like that's going to take more time than what we have at this point.
It deserves more time.
It does deserve more time.
This was really good specific work. I really like what you put together.
Yeah, so
Gives us really good stuff to work with, I thought.
it does. So if we do end up, and it's a good thing we told those who were looking for the form-based discussion that was likely not going to happen. If we could,
Just wanted to ask, do you want to consider the rules? Are those simple
Yeah,
enough
I was going to say,
before you go on? to the
before we
next?
go on, right.
Right.
Yeah, we should.
Oh, the additions to
So,
the rules,
right,
yes. Yeah.
the amendments
Yeah.
to the rule of procedure, because you're adding in the telecommunications piece.
All right, so before we move on to the rest of the agenda, we do have the amendment of the rules of procedure. And I did have a couple of things. Good through page 3. Did anybody have anything up until page 4?
No, I have one on the last page.
Okay. Page 4J, this is really ticky-tack, but it says the director of the planning and zoning. We could probably remove the. I don't know if this is the time for that. It just caught my eye. But the, let's see, there was, trying to make sure, oh, right, it was, oh, not that document. So you said you had something on page 5?
On page, no, point number, maybe this is the next one.
Okay.
It's the next
Telecommunications
one.
Review Board.
We get a couple DRBs that need to be changed to
Yeah.
TRBs, and my name, if it could be with the BH and not the B, that would be great.
And my name is spelled wrong.
Oh, your PH?
So the rules of procedure we're okay with.
Yeah, I thought the
Okay.
rules of procedure, I mean, that was pretty straightforward, and just adding
Okay.
the stuff for the telecommunications piece.
So on,
Do you want-
then, the second document is the Rules of Discovery and Evidence
Evidence.
document, and that one, point 7, has DRB instead of TRB,
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
there's 12.
what we-
and so does 12,
So does
yeah.
12,
Okay, and then the name
Right.
correction.
Dean, it sounds like we're basically taking this right from the DRBs, right?
So these were, yes, it's
Yeah.
99%.
Which, that's a proven template, we might as well, why
Yeah,
reinvent the
that-
wheel,
Right.
right?
As I- Yes, I think at one point I might have said that the DRB spent a fair amount of time doing this, developing it.
So yeah, I think with those two changes, those typo changes and the name changes, I didn't have anything else
Yeah, that
on
was
that.
That was it.
Thought it was good.
it for me. Neil, I know you're still on the phone. Apologies. Did you have any comments on either of these documents?
None that haven't been mentioned so far.
Excellent.
Need to get a little picture.
Okay.
Megan, are you MEGH?
M-E-G-A-N. There's an extra A.
You're not a Megan?
Yeah, just MEG.
Oh, got it.
So does there need to be a motion just to adopt them?
Yes,
Yeah.
probably be in order.
Okay.
Can we move them both at the same time? Do we have to
I
move them
think that would be
separately?
okay.
Yeah. I will move that we accept the amended procedures, the rules of procedure and conflict of interest policy as well as the Shelburne Telecommunications Review Board Rules of Discovery and Evidence.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by Stephen, seconded by Jean. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Neil.
So do we need to sign it, or is that what?
I'll do a clean version.
Yeah.
All right, so that closes that. And then as far as the PD discussion goes, we'll do that at a future meeting. I think some of this stuff is going to end up getting delayed, just because if our next meeting is going to be the hearing, we're looking at late February for the PUD discussion. Okay. And then the last one then was and we're skipping over form-based. So the last one was just future meeting topics. And I think just given this discussion, we
just filled up some
I think we
future
filled up some future meetings. I did have other things for that list. I would like to get into that discussion, but I do think that if February 13th is going to be the TRB hearing, and then we have the second meeting in February, which would probably not be related to that hearing, because if we extended, it would have to be warned and give enough time for everything.
Okay.
So potentially that second meeting in February, that's where I'd propose we follow up with the PUD, maybe have some additional form-based zoning discussion, potentially. And then we'd wrap up the TRB hearing process, if we could, if that doesn't need to get extended again, in roughly early March. Yeah, so, and we might, I'm just saying this now, I think we might need to have a separate session, deliberative or something, if that's going to move that process. One concern I have is with our PUD discussions had, well, I mean, they have implications on that timeline. I didn't want to drag that out,
No,
because I think it's relatively straightforward. I just didn't want to get too hung up tonight.
I had one question on this memorandum, last page, the May missed meeting. There's actually a spreadsheet we need to go, or to put our name if we miss a meeting, or?
Yeah, there's a link that will take you to a place where you can put a 1 or a 0 about your availability.
Got it, okay.
And that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's on the town website?
It's a Google Drive link, and
and we can
send it out again.
we can send it out again. Yeah, it's,
I
yeah.
haven't put anything on it for a while.
Yeah, that would definitely be a good thing just to know, and we'll check in with Stephen as well.
Was there anything besides the PUD? I know the sidewalks was another one where there's someone waiting, things that people are specifically waiting for responses from us.
I was going to ask well, if we're okay with the future meetings and the current status, okay, then the last thing was going to be other business, correspondence and adjournment. I was going to ask, I didn't know if there was a PAS committee meeting between that last discussion and now, or when that might be coming up. Because regarding Brian Pecor's,
Next past meeting is going to be on President's Day, I think.
It's like the 17th or something, right, isn't it?
Did we, okay.
well, to his point, I do want to ensure that we can get an answer, and I know he said that he didn't care and he'll put it in and whatever, but I do think it's worth the discussion. Personally, given all the budget stuff that's been going on with the select board, I did not find this was the right time to bug Peter. I do have it on my list to send him a note just to ask, hey, is there something similar? Do we have precedents? Is this something that we could push for and make a formal request to the select board?
Yeah, and I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Brian was just looking for an answer. He's like, I don't care.
But we don't have an answer without that discussion.
Right, but I guess my follow-up question to that is, what is his time frame? I mean, when's he starting construction? You know, I mean, if he's starting construction in a month or two, we're not going to have an answer for him in a month or two, no matter what. And might as well just let him say, you know, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, he hasn't filed permits or anything like that.
Okay.
So even
That I know of.
if the select board were to decide that they agreed with setting up a fund that somebody could pay into, which is one of the thing we've been talking about as an alternative, would the zoning regulations also need to be amended to reflect that, or
I think they should. If the regs say you're required to do something,
So that's another issue in terms of Brian, that we might not, I mean, I suppose if we could wrap it in with the PUD changes, we could kind of get those two things done pretty quickly.
yeah.
And that would be an update to the form-based code, though, as opposed to, well, I guess still the regs.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it would mean, I guess it would mean another warned hearing. So the select board, let's just say that they were prepared on the 11th, not the 13th. If they were prepared to adopt everything, they would, and they made that change, they would have to warn another hearing. So it would mean none of that stuff could happen until basically 4 weeks later. And so it would affect the timetable, is what it would do. And if they propose a change, there's also the opportunity for the, planning commission would be given a chance to comment. So it would slow things down a bit.
Well, I was imagining that, and maybe I've been mistaken, but I was imagining that the PUD change was happening in a sort of second round of changes,
Okay, I'm
not
sorry.
not with the ones that are on the
I thought we were
table
talking about the
now.
sidewalk stuff and the,
We are, but in terms of making changes to.
another edit. So it would be, yes, so.
To package
if you wanted
those
to
two
just
together.
Decouple it from form-based zoning and just put it as a later form-based zoning change that happens at the same time as something else, yes.
As perhaps the
Okay.
PUD change, right? Because we were
Whichever
trying to
vehicle you chose.
have that kind of calibrate between the two sets of regulations, right?
Yeah, I wished that if we could have picked Brian's brain about it, he might have had some thoughts on the mechanism. But yeah, that's another horse you can ride
Yeah,
to get it to adoption.
okay.
So how about tentatively then, we have, the 13th is going to be our TRB hearing, and then the 22nd, as a tentative agenda, we could get back into the PUD discussion, which we were going to, and then also tack on a deeper discussion around sidewalk fund, because by then, Peter will be out of the budget thing, we can at least have some dialogue there. 27th, I'm sorry.
So we do PUDs and sidewalks?
Yeah, sidewalks, because that's a great point. It would involve updating the regulations as well. So we could at least get that dialogue going. It may not be in time for whatever timeline Brian has.
I don't think that matters so much to him.
It's more-
I think
yeah,
he's
it's-
just looking for,
Right,
I identified something that is unclear and maybe not good policy, and,
exactly. Yeah.
I think you should fix it, and,
And even if we don't catch it for his project, it's
Yeah.
worth catching for.
yeah.
And it is
uh-huh.
something that I
Yeah.
think it sounded like we had loose agreement that it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't
Yes,
think
but
I'm
not
going to
to
be here on the 27th. I think this sounds like a good agenda, but just so,
okay.
and-
That's right,
and I
school
don't mean
holiday,
to-
huh?
yes.
Right, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse in that, but although I agree it doesn't matter what Brian's timeline is, I still think he's waiting to hear from us
Right.
whether he thinks
Sure.
we're going to, any action will be taken before he starts that. And
Yeah.
I think we should.
Well, we can, with this, we can at least tell him what the likely pathway is for this, and then
Yep.
he can, draw his own conclusions about how that works with his timeframe.
Agreed.
I think that's great.
So is there any additional other business?
I think that was plenty.
You don't have anything? I would take an emotion to adjourn then.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Steven, seconded by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.